All right, welcome back. In this video, what we're going to cover is we're going to kind of take what we learned in the last video and we're going to keep moving on and we're going to start talking more about interactivity when it comes to components. All right, and we're going to start teaching you the bread and butter of React here. This is where the stuff starts getting good. Okay, let's say we have this cool button, all right, and we want to increase a counter on the page for, whatever reason. This is just an absolute basic example. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new component here, and I'm just going to call it like counter, right? And then just like all our other files, this is going to be an index.tsx, and then export default function. Counter. Okay. All right. So we have a counter component, and let's just be super basic here. Let's have a variable in here that's called let counter. Okay. Let's just set it to 1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to return. I'm going to have to return multiple components here. So let's just make this like a div, and we'll have it display the counter value like so. And then below it, we'll have another div, and then it'll have one of my buttons in it. Like so. I'm just going to reformat that with Control Alt and L. And so text will be add 1. We want to add 1 here. And as a variant, we'll just make this a success. And then show true. Like so. Now let's go in here and we will return. We will return our counter like so. Okay. And I'm just going to delete the rest of these here. We don't really need this anymore, I don't think. Okay, let's go check out what we have here. All right, that's not looking quite exactly how we want it to. It doesn't have to be anything pretty here, but let's wrap this in a span here, and this will just say counter. This will be like a label. And I want to put some padding, some margin on the right side here. So as I had kind of talked or alluded to this a little bit before, but the way you set a class in React is by using the class name prop. And then so we'll just add margin end of 3. So ME3, this is a bootstrap class. It stands for margin end 3. And basically this is going to be 1 rem. It's going to add a 1 rem margin to the right side of our span here. And if you want to know more about that kind of stuff, just come to the Bootstrap documentation and look for like margin. And then there's this margin and padding section inside of here, and you can see how all these work. This isn't exactly a tutorial necessarily about Bootstrap, but if I can help you kind of figure this out a little bit, that would maybe be a little helpful for you. Okay, so let's just go take a look and see what we have so far. So we have a counter 1, and this says add 1. So this is not quite 100% right yet. And that's because our variant has the capital S on that, and that's not correct. Okay, this looks all right. So also what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap this in a card. This is another just bootstrap component. that I'm importing from React Bootstrap. If you want to go read the documentation on that as well, we come in here and we can look for card. So we're trying to create something that kind of looks like this. And we can see that in a card, there should be a card body. So I'm going to put a card body in here as well. This is just making things look prettier. I don't really need to do this, but go take a look at what we have now. And okay, that helped us out a little bit. This is fine as an example, right? Now, if I just click this button here, it says, hello, you clicked me, because we had set up this on-click handler here, and this is what it's called. But we want to execute our own custom function when we click the counter button, all right? So what we need to do here is we need to add a new prop to our button, and it will be called onClick, and it will take a function of some kind. So this is how I would typically define it. You just use a blank arrow function with a void as a return type, okay? This is kind of like the shorthand to do it. Another way you could do it is you could write function like this. That would be generally okay, but this way works 100%, I know, because that's usually how I write it. Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to add our onClick to our function here. And now we're going to see that we have onClick here and onClick here. And I just want to take away our function that we have wrote inside of the component like this. And now, whatever function we pass into our button here as a prop will be attached to the button's onClick handler here. So then it will call it when we click the button. Okay, so now I'm back here on counter, and we can see that we're missing a prop here. So I'm going to pass in an onClick function or a prop, and I'm going to define a new function onClick up here. And then I want to be counter plus equals 1. So when we click this button, I want to increase our counter by 1. And then I am going to I'm going to alert our counter here. We're just going to say counter like so. Be fine. And then I'm going to pass this onClick handler here. And now we can see through our IDE here, right, when we click on this here, these two are the same thing. So it's taking this function from here and it's putting it down here, and we'll call it when we click this as well. Oh, I see. So we need to make a minor adjustment to this because I made a mistake. So we put the tilde here on both sides, and that allows us to write something like this. If you've never seen this before, this is just a fast way to make formatted strings in JavaScript and TypeScript by using a tilde on both sides here. I think that's what it's called. It's a little tick mark. It's on most keyboards, it's the key that is to the left of your one key on most keyboards. It's just like this little tick on one side and tick on the other. And then if you use a $sign here and then 2 curly braces, this creates a closure. Same as down here, but this $sign says, hey, this is a closure that's coming after it, and you should execute this code. And so we want to just put our counter out there as well. So let's go ahead and save that. And I'm just going to click that. And it says counter is 2. But when we look at our screen here, counter is still 1. What happens if I click it again? Counter is now 3. So we're increasing this counter variable here, and it's not being displayed correctly. It's still displaying its original value. So this is a concept you have to understand when it comes to React. There are special functions, they're called hooks, that we can use in order to dynamically update information on our component. Essentially what's happening when this component is being first created, right? It creates this component and then it creates a variable called counter, and then it executes this code here. And at the time when it executes this code, counter is 1. And then we add this click handler, and then we run that when we click the button, and it increases the counter. But React doesn't know that it needs to re-render the component. The entire component needs to re-render in order to update the value that's in counter. So behind the scenes, inside memory, we're increasing the counter, but this component isn't being redrawn. So we need to have a way to tell React to redraw the component when something happens. And that's where hooks come in. Okay? And so we're going to start talking about state management here. Now, this very simple component, we're going to write our first hook usage here, and we're going to convert this counter into something completely different. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set const, okay? And then we're going to put 2 square braces here, as if we're defining an array, and we kind of are defining an array here. And then this array is going to take 2 different values, okay? One is going to be counter. This is going to be our variable name, same as we had here. And then our second parameter is going to be set counter, like this. This is the standard way to write values that are coming out of a hook. The second value is always set, and then it's the same name as this first one, except you're going to write the capital letter here underneath it, is equal to useState. useState is a hook. And what a hook is it's a essentially a function that can tell React that when the value changes to re-render the component. That's the easiest way I can describe it. Now, useState can take a type, and in this case, we're going to say it's a number. And inside of these parentheses here is where you define the default value of your variable, right? So in this case, we want counter's default variable to be 1. Kind of screw that up like so. This is kind of the same as writing this, but it's now reactive. Now, when we adjust, essentially what we've done is we've created a state, okay? So this counter is a state, and it's just a single number. And the second parameter is a function. It's a setter function for this variable. So whenever we call this function here and pass in a new value, it will let the component know that it needs to re-render this component. Okay, so it'll make a little more sense here in a second. So what I want to do here is inside of our onClick function here, instead of counter plus equals 1, we want to have set counter plus 1, like so. All right, and I'm just going to take out, I don't know if I should leave this alert in there or not. We'll kind of see what happens here. All right, so now we're back here in our tab, and now when I click this, it says counter is equal to 1. But then it updates because counter is now equal to 2. And you might be like, that's kind of weird. Let's increase it again. It says counter is equal to 2, but now counter is equal to 3. Okay, so what's happening here? All right, so this is where you got to start kind of like getting your mind into like a different kind of format on how this works. So the reason that this is happening is we are clicking our button, it's executing this function, it's calling this set counter function, and we're assigning a new value. We're increasing the value by 1, and we're setting the new value. But here's the thing, the value doesn't update instantly. there's actually a little bit of lag time um, in between you calling an update function and the component re-rendering, which is why when we have the alert after it, it has the old value of counter inside of it. Okay. And you can actually call multiple state updates in a row, and essentially it will batch all of them together, at least inside of a certain level of a window. Um, this is a very important concept to understand because when you actually build like really complex components, this matters a ton, like a ton. Um, Understanding that the value doesn't update immediately, but it does happen generally so fast that you can't even tell. So let's just take this alert out of there because then you can see when we're in here in our tab, and I'm just going to reload this page and we're back to our counter is equal to 1. And see, now I click this and it responds instantly, faster than really you can perceive it. But there is a small lag there in between you clicking that button, it calling the function to update the value, and then it re-rendering. Most of the time, this is not a big deal. But again, just keep that in mind. And now we have a completely reactive component. So in this video, you learned about how to make a component reactive. You learned the useState hook, which is just one of many different hooks. And you learn how to make your objects interactable. So we'll continue building on these concepts in the next lesson, and I hope to see you there.